Treasure Troller here from the partially mask-wearing militant state of Michigan, where we have Gretchen Whitmer as our governor and dictator for the next, about 4 years. So it's 2 vlogs in a row, and I was listening a little bit to last night's vlog, which will be up just after I probably film this and get home and whatever. But I still have a little bit of that nasal thing, and my voice sounds better right now than it normally does. It sounds a little high pitched. Now I've got that tenor in it. It's got a real radio voice, vlog voice for it. But today I wanted to talk about Jamille Hill. And personally, I think Jamille Hill, who is a writer, and she's been a sports analyst, I guess you could say, and political rabble-rouser. And we'll get to that part in a minute. But to me, Jamille Hill is really nothing more than a hood rat from Detroit. She grew up in the hood. She lived a pretty hard life. But the girl left the hood, but the hood never left the girl. And I will say, she went to Michigan State. And I'm not going to, do the race thing as far as enrollment. You have to be a pretty good student to get into Michigan State. I will say that. There's no way that I could have gotten into Michigan State. And so I think she was a rather learned student if she was able to get into Michigan State. But Jamille Hill had a podcast called Jamille Hill is Unbothered. Well, now Jamille Hill is unemployed. She was working with She was working at ESPN and was removed from ESPN. Was going to start this network on Spotify, her own podcast in this Black Women's Network that really never got off the ground, and then Jamille and Spotify are going their separate ways. And as a parting shot to Spotify, she said this. She's, sort of challenging Spotify to give a black person or a black woman, I don't remember exactly it was either a black person or a black woman, $100 million contract. Basically, Joe Rogan money. But Jamille, I want to give Jamille, rather than, I think the hood rat thing is the only, personal shot I want to take at her. I want to give her some career advice. And she probably doesn't need all that much, because I think these announcers and sportscasters and whatnot make pretty good money. So she probably doesn't need a lot, but I'm going to give her some anyways. I know that the things you say things and people will promptly retort, and you are unbothered by their retorts. But that doesn't mean you're right. And that doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't going to cause concern. What caused her to lose her job at ESPN was first a tweet that Donald Trump is a white supremacist, and anybody that works for Donald Trump is a white supremacist as well. And then during the Colin Kaepernick thing, Jerry Jones had said that the Cowboys would not be taking a knee during the national anthem. And Jamille Hill said, well, if that's the way Jerry Jones feels, well then we should boycott the sponsors of the Dallas Cowboy. Now, the reaction might not have bothered Jamille, but I'm sure it bothered the sponsors. It bothered the NFL. It bothered the Cowboys. I seriously doubt that it bothered Jerry Jones. But it bothered ESPN, and she lost her job. So you have to be aware that although you can say some things, it has to not bother your boss. If it bothers your boss, there's a problem. And when you sort of make statements like that put your boss in a bad light, ESPN, they're going to fight back. I almost consider Jamille Hill as the black female Keith Olbermann. That's just ornery, cantankerous, and just really looking to lose the next job they get. The other thing, too, was this challenge of giving an African American a $100 million contract. And you know, there's a bit of a racist tone to that. You give a white man that kind of money, but you won't give a black person that kind of money. Well, who would you give $100 million to? And I don't even know how many years that is for with Joe Rogan. I honestly don't know. But Joe Rogan spent a number of years on YouTube building an audience. He was also heavy into the UFC and broadcasting. And, you know, he was on television. But as far as podcasting, he spent a lot of time on YouTube building an audience and building up his channel. There isn't anybody like that out there that is doing that currently. But there are a couple of people, I guess if they said they would be interested in doing a podcast, that I would be willing to sit down with and hear what they'd have to say. I mean, Barack Obama. If Barack Obama contacted Spotify, then that he was, you know, he's interested in doing a podcast. He's looking, you know, in the neighborhood of Joe Rogan money. I would sit down and talk with Barack. I wouldn't talk to his representatives. I would want to sit down, a one-on-one meeting with Barack, talking to him about what his plans were, what kind of interviews he wanted to do, what kind of show it was going to be. And then I'll get to the downside of the Barack thing. And then, of course, Oprah. I mean, anybody would. You'd be crazy not to sit down and have a talk with Oprah. But like I said, I don't know how many years the Rogan contract is for. So even if it's 5 years, that's $20 million a year. With Oprah, after taxes, it's probably $10 million for a year. I don't know if $10 million Oprah gets out of bed for $10 million a year, no less. I don't see it. But the problem with even Oprah and Barack Obama doing the podcast is you have to be forever indebted to Black Lives Matter. You have to be LGBTQ LMNOP pro. Everything they do is right. And if you have a problem with them, well, then you're racist, bigot, sexist, homophobe. You have to be on that side. You also have to believe, hey, women or men can be in women's sports. You really have to be very anti, how would you say it? Mainstream. You're very against the grain. And like a perfect example would be Joe Rogan isn't that political. Joe Rogan had said he would have voted for Trump, or he voted for Trump. But I can see right now, Joe Rogan could say this. He'd say, this Biden guy, I mean, he's got to get out of there. I mean, this guy can't walk 10 feet without falling twice. I mean, he's got health issues. You can't have someone with health issues running the United States. And he says, Trump, I just don't want the hassles. I don't, he kind of disappointed me in this or that, but this Robert Kennedy Jr. looks like a good candidate. And I think I could, I really think I'm going to look more to him, and I really think I'm going to support Kennedy. You could not get Barack Obama to do that. He couldn't say, Joe has had his day. And if it's between Joe and Trump, well, you really have to go with Trump. You can't have someone with health issues running this country. You'll never get Barack Obama to say that. You probably couldn't get Oprah to say that. They're just too far to the left to be a successful program, because those kind of things are going to come up. They're going to want to, as Joe Rogan is kind of an exchange of thoughts and ideas and questions. So, what was it like being in the White House? Someone would be saying, hey, who didn't you, who on your staff kind of was a pain in the ass? What do you, these January 6ers, but really, I mean, you had these Antifa people taking over parts of cities. I mean, Brock, don't you see where some people might have a problem with that? They're just not going to, they're not going to be, I don't think they would do well in the podcast field, in the podcast area, because they're going to be too far in debt to causes that are just not part of mainstream. So Jamille, I know it doesn't bother you, and you're walking around today unemployed, probably with a bunch of money in the bank, and saying, I have my FU money, so what you say can't bother me. But I certainly wouldn't want anybody to follow Jamille. I would not buy a book on how to succeed in life and career by Jamille Hill. I don't think I would recommend that book. So with that, this is Treasure Troller saying aloha and good day.